Okay, perfect. I'm gonna start now. Hello and welcome, dear participants, to our session today entitled Multi-stakeholder Dialogue for the Search for Financing and the Adequate Management of Wastewater within the Basin. You are enjoying a course offered thanks to the support of the GEF CReW Plus project, whose purpose is to provide knowledge and a space for the co-creation of water and sanitation solutions in the wider Caribbean region. The GEF CReW Plus project is a collaborative project funded by the Global Environment Facility, co-implemented by the Inter-American Development Bank and the United Nations Environment Program in 18 countries in the wider Caribbean region. GEF CReW Plus is being executed on behalf of the IDB by the German Agency for International Cooperation and the Organization of American States, and on behalf of the United Nations Environment Program by the Secretariat of the Cartagena Convention. The GEF CReW Plus project offers innovative, nature-based solutions to mitigate the effects of untreated wastewater on their mind, environment, and public health. The Central American Institute for Public Administration, ICAP, is the institution that specializes in the education and training of human resource at the local, national, and regional level. So it's a pleasure for us to be the institution in charge of facilitating this learning space. The institution was created in 1954 within the United Nations with the support of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. My name is Maria Paula Rojas, and I'm the project assistant. I will be the person who will accompany the teacher this morning. And also, before we begin, the session will be recorded and uploaded to the ICAP Virtual Campus website. If you do not wish to be recorded, I kindly request that you indicate this via the meeting chat. The training provided in the framework of this academic program will be divided into modules. These sessions belongs to Module 5, in which will address the identification of the mechanism available for multi-stakeholders dialogue and the development of thematic content such as the ladder of participation in public policies and participatory management tools. In addition, we remind you that upon active participation during the synchronous session and the completion of evaluation activities hosted in the ICAP virtual campus, you can opt for a certificate of achievement issued by ICAP with regional recognitions. Now I will introduce the facilitator of the module. The facilitator with us today is Mr. Pablo Viloch. He has training in strategic leadership for sustainability at the Berkman Institute for Technology in Sweden. Um, in Sweden, as well as knowledge and training for the field of international relations and intercultural management. He teaches leadership, sustainability, and conflict. Also, facilitate multi-stakeholders dialogue process for sustainability. He is a founding partner of Local Minds, a consulting firm specializing in learning process. I will now give the floor to Paulo to begin to the model 5.
Thank you very much, Maria Paula. It's a pleasure to me to be here today sharing our learnings, our thoughts, and I hope that we will make the most of these 2 hours together. The structure of the session today will be like this. The first hour, we will focus on participatory dialogue processes. So I will send you a brief link via chat like this. And we will see in a few moments the results of this questionnaire. And after that, I will share for our learning, our contents, considering the objectives that I will share with you in a few moments. And after 1 hour of contents, we will have a reflection of an analysis for a case study. So we will have the testimonial from Diana Rojas, who will share a real case. So we will listen to her words and her experience, her analysis, and we will have a moment of reflection from that case. And for the last 30 minutes, we will listen to Mario Suardi, who has a long experience regarding finance and how to fund this kind of wastewater projects. That's why we are sharing the same module, dialogue and fundraising, because dialogue is very important for fundraising as well. Okay, so let's start sharing my screen. Please let me know once you see my presentation. So we are in the module 5, the module of multi-stakeholder dialogue for fundraising towards sustainable wastewater management in watersheds. Maria Paula already introduced myself. Maybe I would like to highlight that everything that I am going to share with you today um, does not only come from books and theory, but it comes from embodied experience. I've been working, facilitating multi-stakeholder dialogues for the last 20 years in different countries in Latin America, mainly in Chile, but also in Colombia, in Ecuador, in Brazil, in Argentina. And I've been training many facilitators, so I'm very happy to be able to share with you some practical tips and some reflections from the field, from experience. And even the last 5 years, I've been working in multi-stakeholder dialogue process regarding watershed management and water conflicts in different places of Latin America. So what's the general objective for today? We want to strengthen the conceptual and technical capacities of workers from public institutions in Central America and the Caribbean regarding multi-stakeholder dialogue for wastewater management. We understand that this is only 1 week and this is only a session of 2 hours. This is a very complex issue, but at least we want to plant some seeds of curiosity in order to enable you to go farther, to go deeper. So we want to open some windows to show the passionate field of participation and dialogue, so you can jump on it, and if you want, you can get a deeper dive in those participatory methodologies. So what are the specific objectives? Well, at the end of this module, the participants should be able to reflect on the importance of multi-stakeholder dialogue to face challenges related to wastewater management and its financing. And second, they identify participatory management tools and multi-stakeholder dialogue for the involvement of institutions with civil society and wastewater management. And third, identify the necessary conditions to design and facilitate multi-stakeholder participatory processes for the construction of a shared vision of the water cycle within the framework of a circular economy, both in watersheds and in open waters. So we will talk about how to build a shared vision of our projects within the water cycle. So what will be the contents for today? First, we will start with why. Why is this important? Why and what's the importance and what's the need of multi-stakeholder dialogue to face the challenges related to wastewater management and its funding. Then we will explore the levels of participation and we will explain the public participation spectrum proposed by the International Association of Public Participation. After that, we will share some tools for institutional participatory management and multi-stakeholder dialogue to engage civil society organizations in wastewater management. And we will share and we'll have an overview of some frameworks that help us to design and facilitate multi-stakeholder participatory processes to build a shared vision of water cycle within a circular economy. And we will share some conditions for multi-stakeholder dialogue for water resilience. So the idea is to understand what are the previous conditions, what are the conditions we must generate in order to have legitimate dialogue processes. And we end with a case study of a real conflict due to problematic odors in a wastewater treatment plant, and we will explore together some solution paths, some
Ya, luar
potentials.
no ka
Um, Remember to put your microphones in silence. And so, in order to start, I hope that you have already been filling the form. I see that there are no answers yet in the question. So I invite you to fill the form, and you can access the form clicking on the link I sent you via chat. If please let me know if you can't access it, so Maria Paula can send you in an easier way. Excellent. I see that 4 people have already answered, so I will give you more time so you can fulfill the questionnaire that is available in the link in the chat in Teams. So I will pose some rhetoric questions inviting you to reflect. Why do you think that multi-stakeholder dialogue is important? Why is multi-stakeholder dialogue important and necessary to face challenges related to wastewater management? What happens when there is no dialogue or engagement with stakeholders? What could happen if a community is not consulted or listened or considered regarding the construction of a treatment plant in their locality? Well, we see that there are consequences. When there is no dialogue, when we don't listen to the people, when we don't listen to the local communities, there are conflicts. People could go to the streets. It could affect to our reputation, to the reputation of the companies, of the municipality, of the project. We see people organized against the plans. So on the other side, we see examples that dialogue that show that dialogue is possible and dialogue has good consequences. Uh, but not always, because the importance of dialogue processes is not the only fact of speaking and listening, but the quality of the dialogue process, the design. That's why we will be talking about designing dialogue process. How can we design conversations? How can we design participatory methodologies that enable an authentic participation? Excellent. I see that we already have some results in the questionnaire, so I will show you eh, the results. Perfect. Okay, so let me 1 minute so I can share the screen again. Here it's the Mentimeter. Perfect, I see it. Okay, so here I will show you. Well, I see that 9 people have already answered the form. So we see that 4 people feel expectation, and 3 people feel curiosity. One feels enthusiasm, and one tired. Thank you for sharing your feelings. And sharing feelings is a good way of starting a dialogue, because dialogue processes are also emotional. Uh, Dialogue process involves emotions. Sometimes we think that wastewater management projects have only a technical part, and we work a lot with engineers or with people who have a strategic planning. However, when people are invited to talk about their concerns, it's because they are feeling intense emotions, sometimes rage, sometimes um, anger, sometimes fears. So it's important to understand that when we open the space for dialogue, we are also opening a space for emotions, and don't be afraid of that, because we are humans. But it's important to understand how can we manage all those emotions, and how can we create a safe space for them to express, um, and, and consider them. Okay, when we ask if you uh, what's the question? Have you ever been part of facilitating a participatory process? We see that 1 people said no, and the most of people said yes. Excellent. 5 from 6 have experience. Great. That's so we have an experienced audience here today. That's great. So we can engage in a more um rich conversation. Okay. Now I hope you can answer the next questions in the questionnaire. So I will stop sharing the slide so you can keep on answering the questionnaire, and I will go through the slides, and later on we will be able to see the results of the questionnaire. Excellent. So let's go on. First of all, when we are trying to design participatory process, it's important to understand what kind of participation do we want. What's the level of participation that our project needs? What's the level of participation that help or contributes to the purpose of the organization or the institution or the project? There are many frameworks, and here I put together 3 frameworks for citizen participation. One is a classical framework, which is called the ladder of citizen participation, from the late 60s. And you see there are 8 levels. Um, the lowest level is the absence of participation, no participation, no real, no true participations, considering therapy. Then the second level, where Einstein puts advisory, collaboration, information, is what she says is facade participation, which is not a authentic participation. It's a way of involving people, but there is no incidents there. There's a way of listening, but without um, committing real power of incidents and impact. And finally, the three in a higher position in the ladder, which are citizen control, power delegation, and collaboration, that are around citizen power. So if we go to the next ladder, we see that the IEPP, the International Association for Public Participation, developed a spectrum. For them, it's not a ladder, it's a spectrum. The public participation spectrum 22 years ago. And we see for five levels, no? From informing, consulting, involving, collaborating, and empowerment or empowering. And the third ladder, with only 3 steps, proposed by the OECD, the Organization for Cooperation and Economic Development. They propose a framework with 3 levels that are information, consult, and active participation. So I will focus today on the second ladder, on the IAPP spectrum, that was designed to assist with the design and the selection of the level of participation that defines the public's role in any public participation process. I would say that this spectrum is used internationally in many countries, and it's found in public participation plans around the world. Here, the main question that we must pose to ourselves is, what kind of participation could help us to achieve our purpose? What is needed? What is really needed in each phase? So let's see what's the promise for each level. As you see in the spectrum, the dimension from left to the right is an increasing impact of the decision. No? So we have here two levels, no? The promise to the public and the public participation goal. So in the lowest impact level, which is informing, we see that the goal of informing is to provide the public with balanced and objective information to assist them in understanding the problem, alternative choices, opportunities, or solutions. And the promise to the public is, well, we will keep you informed. Don't expect more. We are informing, and we will keep you informed if there are more details. Then the second level is consulting, the consult. And the consult is the goal of the consult step is to obtain public feedback on analysis, alternatives, or decisions. So the promise to them is, well, we will keep you informed, listen to and acknowledge concerns and aspirations, and provide feedback on how public input influences the decision. So this does not mean that we will do everything you want. That the promise is, well, we are listening, we want to consider your expectations, but don't expect us to accomplish all of them. Then the third level in public participation spectrum is to involve. And the goal of this level is to work directly with the public throughout the process to ensure that public concerns and aspirations are consistently understood and considered. So, what's the promise here in the involved level? Well, the promise is to work, that we will work with you to ensure that your concerns and aspirations are directly reflected in the alternatives developed and provide feedback on how public input influence the decision. O sea, this means that it's not only about listening, it's listening and ensure that your concerns and aspirations are reflected. So we are uh, making the most of ourselves, but also considering a sense of reality, a sense of realism. The fourth level is about collaboration. It implies a more symmetric position. Um, so the goal of the collaborate step, the collaborate level, is to partner with the public in each aspect of the decision, including the development of alternatives and the identification of the preferred solution. Here, you are not only listening, not only involving, but you are sitting in the same table and you are partnering. You are working together with the same goal. So the promise here is to look, that we will look to you for advice and innovation in formulating solutions and incorporate your advice and recommendations into the decisions to the maximum extent. And finally, the fifth level, which is empowering or empowerment. The goal of this level is to place final decision making in the hands of the public. Uh, Here, you delegate the power, you give power to the people, and the promise here is, well, we will implement what you decide. Here, there's true power. Okay. So it's important to understand that when we are working with this kind of ladder, it's very important to be transparent from the very beginning, not only in the process, but from the design of the process, and also when you are inviting people, when you are calling people for a participatory space, it's important that since the very first minute, in the first slides, in the setting, when you are setting the ground rules, to let people know what kind of participation are you inviting them, what kind of game are they playing, what are the rules, and what's the promise, what will you do with those results, with those inputs. Because if there is anything worse that not opening participatory spaces, is to opening them and uh, realizing that those participatory spaces have no effect, have no impact. That could create uh, worse effects and worse results. Okay, now I see some of the results that I will give you more time so that you can um, complete the questionnaires. Okay, now yeah, I understand. Okay. Okay, so let's see what are the conditions for multi-stakeholder dialogue. Um, Regarding our before starting to share tools and techniques and methodologies, it's important to explore what are the previous conditions. And those previous conditions for a better multi-stakeholder dialogue can be summarized in principles for dialogue. Okay. Mhm. What are the multi-stakeholder conditions for dialogue? Well, first is transparency. Transparency gives you trackability. So once you have implemented the decisions, or once you have designed a plan in a participatory way, you are able to see, oh, who said this, what's the origin of this idea. So you can you can see the and you can track the origin of who said what. So it's very important when we design participatory processes, um, record who said that. In many ways, it can be through inquiries, it could be through post-its, through online platforms. It depends, but there are some processes where it's important who said what. There are some other processes where it's not so important. But transparency builds trust, and there are many countries, especially in our continent, where there is a lot of inequality, that people feel reluctant to participate in collaborative process or participatory process when they feel that the playground is not fair. It's for everybody. So the more transparent we are, the more we will be able to build a better trust and deeper trust. Second principle is to have access, equitable access to information. Um, that means to open the information, to open the data, share them openly using technology, the online platforms, and see what's the appropriate channel to make this information accessible. Then the third principle is inclusion. So when we invite people to a participatory process, we should ask ourselves, who could feel excluded? Who is important to engage in this process? Who should not be excluded in this process? Uh, who could be our ally? Who could be against the project? Who could support this project? And it's important not only inviting those who support the project. It's very important to invite those who could also be against the project. Why? If you remember the tale of the Sleeping Beauty, all the story about the Sleeping Beauty, it's because they didn't invite the witch to the party. So let's invite the witch to the party. And when I say this archetype of the witch, I am referring those people who are against the project, or those people who make us feel uncomfortable, uh, because it takes courage to be inclusive. Because if not, our projects could be condemned to be sleeping for many years, such in the tale, in the fairy tale. The third principle is flexibility. And when we are saying flexibility, that means that don't get stuck with the plans. Sometimes uh, plans are important, plans and KPIs and deadlines are important. However, we must understand that participatory processes are non-linear processes. So you cannot be an engineer of participatory process, because you cannot control every detail, because um, participatory processes are inherently complex. because there are many variables, many people, many interests, sometimes and it's unpredictability. You cannot predict and control what will happen. Sometimes you cannot um, promise a linear output. So it's important to understand that participatory processes, and especially when we are looking for collective intelligence and collective wisdom in participatory processes, those are emerging properties of complex systems. Then the next principle is stakeholder engagement. Okay, so sometimes not everybody must debate on everything. Not everybody must give their opinion for everything. Maybe they have the right to express their opinion, but you don't invite your kids to, or sometimes you don't invite your kids to a romantic dinner. Sometimes you must be strategic also when deciding what are the key stakeholders. How do you prioritize the stakeholder? That's why it's very important to have stakeholder mapping and stakeholder prioritization in order to focus your scarce time, focus your energy and time and money and budget in engaging the key strategic stakeholders. And the final principle I would suggest for conditions, probably there are more conditions. Those are the conditions and the principles that I've seen that are most useful when you are dealing with complex issues. And the last one is informed incidents. That means, okay, how can you impact the decision in an informed way? Because it is not only about creating a space and filling post-its and writing flip charts. It's important that all the decisions we take collaboratively are well um, evidence based and in a scientific way or evidence based information. Okay, when we are thinking about designing and facilitating participatory processes, we must consider some key roles. For example, the role of the facilitator. Um, I see I see that you have experiences facilitating processes or participating in some of them. The role of the facilitator is very important because you must be listening to the people, you must assure the authentic participation of people, you must uh, design powerful questions, and you have only one opportunity to an initial framing, which is in the initial setting, when you are clarifying the ground rules, when you are creating the first agreements, because sometimes we think that mm, dialogue has fruits and has impact and results when you have agreements at the end of the dialogue process. However, in order to have a good dialogue, a fruitful dialogue, we need to start with the agreements, but not the result of the output agreements. We need agreements as an input to build the container. Um, a friend of mine also always says that if your content is subtle, is intangible, such a precious perfume or a gas, you need a very hard container. such a bottle of oxygen or a hard bottle for a subtle perfume. So if if the content of our participatory processes is fragile or is delicate, we need to create a robust, a strong container that is at the same time flexible and robust. And how can we create that kind of a social container, emotional container? Well, creating agreements, creating previous agreements about the way we are going to talk and speak and listen. For example, you can use the first minutes of a dialogue session, uh, getting some quick agreements about how to respect each other, how to record the meeting, how to consider diversity in the process, regarding gender, regarding race, ethnicities, or disabilities. So it's very important to be able of creating that initial framing and creating a good robust container for the process. So once you have a strong and robust container, you can pose powerful questions that help people to explore meaningful scenarios. You can invite people for deep listening, because once you throw a question, a powerful question, your duty is to listen the answer. Uh, and once you listen the answer, and if you have already powerful questions, you will see how the collective intelligence and collective wisdom emerges from people. And there's some conditions and some principles. For example, we see that collective intelligence emerge when we have smaller groups, ideally less than 4 or 5, because humanity is divided between introverts and extroverts. And introverts tend to self-inhibit their wisdom within bigger groups. So if we want to listen to the introverts' wisdom, we need to break out in smaller groups of 4 to 5 people. We also see that a greater diversity contributes to collective intelligence, but not only surface level diversity, but also deep level diversity. That means our cognitive styles, our worldviews, the way we process information, learning, knowledge. That's what we mean through via deep diversity. Then a very important factor in order to create a true participatory process and dialogue and collective intelligence is to rotate the power of speaking, which is also the power of being listened. And don't forget the basic principles we mentioned in the last slide. Okay, so once we understand the role of the facilitator, once we understand the level of participation, then we can use some frameworks to design participatory process. And here we have a very useful
Pablo, we can hear you. I think your mic is on mute.
now. Yes, maybe I touched everything.
Yeah, it
Okay,
was just for a few seconds, so
okay,
don't worry.
thank you for. Okay, I will start again in the slide. Please remember to fill the rest of the questions in the questionnaire. So we can at the end we can check your oops. Yeah, 1 second. Let's go again with the diamond process here. Just 1 second. Yeah, here's the diamond. Okay, so I was telling you that we are now exploring the participation diamond, or the diamond model of participation, which is proposed by Sam Kanner. And this is a framework to design and to read, to make meaning, to make sense of participatory processes. And we see there are two axes. One vertical axis, that means the diversity of ideas, and the horizontal axis is time. So we start with a problem, a challenge, a question, and the second phase is divergence. And divergence opens possibilities, opens ideas. Then we have an emergent phase, which is also called the grown zone, because people here can feel the tension of too many ideas. If maybe if you have already been into a brainstorming and you have pasted lots of sticky notes in your whiteboard, you will notice that there is a moment of saturation. No? Imagine all your wall or all your whiteboard filled of colorful post-its with many ideas, and you feel really overwhelmed. That's the sensation, the feeling of the grown zone. It's wow, too much. And now what can we do? It's overwhelming abundance of creativity. Now we need that's the first signal that we must hold that tension until we see that something new, and we have something new and emerges, new insights come, so we can go to the next phase, which is convergence. And with convergence we can use critical thinking, we can prioritize, we can go for a consensus, we can uh, put some ideas aside or aggregate them until we have a closer point with solution, with a decision. For example, Walt Disney, when he invited their creative teams to create new characters for the movies, they had two rooms. In one room, the first room was the creative room, and in the creative room, everything was possible, was allowed. They could make mistakes, they could invent new things, because creativity needs to suspend judgment. However, once they had lots of ideas, then the same drawers, they went to the next room, and the next room was the vision room, when they use the critical thinking, the judgment thinking, so they start to edit, to correct, to recognize the mistakes, and to polish the creative work, to refine them, to focus on the details. Okay. If we go to the next slide, we will see the participatory management tools. So I ask you, what tools do you already know of participatory management and multi-stakeholder dialogue for the involvement of institutions with civil society in wastewater management? Now we have a moment to see the results of the form. Let me check the results of the Menti. Excellent. So I see now more people that already answered the question. Thank you very much for that. So let's, I will share now the results of the questionnaire so we can have a collective understanding of your opinions and ideas. Here was the collective mood. We see that we have 3/4 of the group that have experience facilitating participatory process. Here we see we agree with the sentences. So we see here that some people feel that citizen participation is very slow, and other things that it not that some of them don't agree. Then um, um, almost nobody thinks that the multi-stakeholder dialogue is a waste of time. Then when we ask about communities profit from conflicts, we see a 2.1. Then to the sentence about public institutions should listen more to the people, most of people agree with that sentence. Then in the next sentence, when we ask if you are willing to accept a wastewater plant in my backyard, um, I see a different distribution. Three shouldn't, don't, three disagree, one agree. Oh, no, no one agree. When we see it's important to build a shared vision of each project, 9 people agree that it's very important to build a shared vision. If with the sentence of which I need to learn to facilitate participatory dialogue process, we see that 7 agree with that sentence and 5 almost agree. And when we ask about multi-stakeholder dialogue is difficult but necessary, most of you, 11 from 11 of 14, agree with that. So we see that we understand that public institutions should listen more to the people. We understand that we need to learn to facilitate. We understand that multi-stakeholder is difficult but necessary. Sometimes it could be slower. Um, and it's important to understand those insights. Let's and our beliefs. So when I asked you about why is multi-stakeholder important, you say that it's important to achieve goals, that is important because it's very complicated subject and it's very difficult to please everybody, that this is in order to get different viewpoints because the technocrats may not know much about the area proposed, because you can learn from different points of view and you can have disruptive solutions at the same time. Great. Because the project could be dead if population doesn't see the importance of wastewater treatment. The problem is associated with to operation of the plant. Great. Collective wisdom. Excellent. Oops. Let's see. Because they can bring new ideas and perspective. Very good. Let's see the next slide. Why a wastewater project that has been developed in a participatory way could raise funds more easily? Here we are connecting dialogue and fundraising. And you said because it has more possibilities of success, because there's a social support for it, because if all stakeholders feel that they have a part of purpose in the development of a project and understand how they will benefit, they may be more inclined to help to raise funds. Because they public involvement and funds organize for projects. The project can have more commitment from stakeholders. Excellent. Basically, it's I would say summarize all these opinions considering the risk of projects. Many of the or institutions that fund this kind of projects not only focus on the profitability or the return on investment, they also focus on the risk of the project. And when you have done a good job in engaging people, inviting them to participate, creating legitimacy of the project, you are managing risk. You are preventing future conflicts. You are preventing future risks. So a good participatory project is a less risky project for a funder. So, and a project without participation could be a very risky project because it could involve some conflicts. Okay, so here is the cloud of the potential consequences of not consulting the community, and we see that you wrote protests, public pushback, lawsuits, delays, feeling excluded, influence negatively, boycott, tensions, oppositions, project failure, social reject, omitting cultural roots. Excellent. I celebrate the collective wisdom and intelligence of this group. I see. So regarding to the tools, we are almost ending this part of the tools. I see that you already know many tools to work in participatory dialogue processes with stakeholders from civil society, and you already know the informative website, public service, working groups, community meetings, presentations, focus mix, stakeholder matrix, public comments, assemblies. Excellent. Well, thank you for your slides, for your wall cloud, and I will share you my last slides so we can finish our content, and in a few minutes we'll go with the case. So, well, you have already mentioned many typical participatory management tools. For example, the stakeholder mapping, the prioritization matrix for stakeholders, the empathy map that is more used on the entrepreneurship and innovation field, that is important if we are going to customize some of participatory processes with different segments of population. For example, if we are working with an indigenous people or with some segment of people that are more in a more exclusion or vulnerability area, then we could create some conditions for them to enable the participation. Then we have already commented the engagement diamond or participation diamond. And it's important to have a strategic design in the tools, also to harvest all the fruits of the conversations via systematization of the processes. So we can think of technology or flip charts or post-it. Let's record the main ideas, the main conclusions, all the outputs, and in order to document them for knowledge management. Also, listening and feedback mechanism are very important regarding especially local communities. And there are many other participatory methodologies, and I would suggest some practices from the art of hosting global communities, such as the circle practice, that implies speaking with intention, listen with attention. And the World Cafe, that is a participatory methodology that helps us to unleash the collective wisdom of bigger groups from 9 people to 3,000, both face-to-face and online. And the open space technology, which is a participatory methodology that works better when we have multiple stakeholders and diverse stakeholders that must face urgent and complex challenges. So if you have challenges that are complex and urgent, and we have lots of people, multiple stakeholders who are different among them, the open space technology could help a lot uh, to create a safe space to enable the a self-organization to decide on priorities and explore possibilities. So, how to share a vision? How to build a shared vision? Here, the strategic backcasting framework can help a lot because you must understand that the vision of the success that you want for the future um, is what leads when you are not there. So the purpose, the vision, the future scenario you really want is the vision of the future. So if we collectively build and share a vision of the future we really want, uh, then we will put our energies, our efforts to support that future, that vision of the future. Okay, so we will have 4 steps in order to build a shared vision. First, create awareness of the system, where we are, who is who we are, each main stakeholder. Then we draw a baseline in the B step that must be analytic. So we can understand what's the baseline today in the present. Then once we have a systems awareness with systems thinking, and we have a baseline with analytics thinking, then we have a creative tension between a very well designed present and the vision of the future we want. So in order to bridge that gap between the present and the future, we need to create solutions. That is the C step, where we need creative thinking. And finally, once we have all the potential ideas in the ground zone, when we are almost overwhelmed with the abundance of potential creative solutions, then we focus and we decide on priorities we can converge. And that's the D step, for D for deciding priorities, where we need critical thinking. So the advantage of this backcasting approach for building a shared vision is that um, it's a structured approach, a stepwise approach, where we first use systems thinking, then we use analytic thinking, then we use creative thinking, and finally we use critical thinking. And those um, kinds of thinking, uh, in if we try to do everything at the same time, the critical thinking inhibits the creative thinking, and the analytical thinking inhibits the systems thinking. Because if you are trying to see all the forest, you cannot get lost onto the details of each leaf, of each branch, of each trunk, of each tree. So first you need to go to the big forest, then you analyze each leaf on each trunk in each tree branch. Okay, so that's all from my part regarding contents. I hope that this hour has been significant input for you, for your reflection and your practice. Now I would like to introduce Diana. Diana Rojas Cañete. She works with me in the same group, in the same team, and we have been working together in different projects. And now, well, I will introduce her, and she will speak in Spanish. That I will introduce. I will translate her sentences. Um, she's a cultural manager. She's Bachelor of Tourism and Culture from the University of Valparaiso with a diploma in Urban and Territorial Environmental Citizen Participation, integrated at the Catholic University of Chile, and she has 10 years of experience in the design and implementation of meetings and participatory instances of high complexity. She is also a liaison with environmental civil society organizations in the Mingamar program at the Global Minds Foundation. Welcome, Diana. I will stop sharing. Diana, now it's your turn, so you can hablar en español and I will translate for you.
Muchas gracias, Pablo, y muchas gracias a todas las personas presentes. A continuación, relataré un conflicto socioambiental que se viene dando actualmente en el sector de la Farfana. Lo voy a relatar como habitante, dado que viví hace 6 meses allí.
Excellent. Well, she says, thank you very much for listening. I will tell you about a societal environmental conflict that is currently being experienced in La Farfana sector. I will relate it as an inhabitant since it's a place where my family lives and where I lived until 6 months ago.
Como contexto territorial, nos vamos a ubicar en la región metropolitana de Chile, geográficamente la zona central. Allí en la periferia de la región se ubica la comuna de Maipú, la segunda más grande de la región.
As a territorial context, we will locate ourselves in the metropolitan region of Chile, geographically the central zone, where there on the periphery of the region, the municipal area of Maipú, the second largest in the region.
Cuenta con una proyección de 578.000 habitantes y a grandes rasgos, les voy a contar ahora, pues voy a retomar al final, la comuna cuenta con zonas rurales, suelos de uso agrícola, junto con una gran cantidad de napas subterráneas que son fuente de agua y reserva de vida de la comuna.
Well, with an area of 135 square kilometers and a population beyond 578,000 inhabitants, broadly speaking, the community has rural areas and land for agricultural use, together with a large number of underground waters that are a source of water and a reserve of community life.
Allí, en la periferia de Maipú, se encuentra el sector de la Farfana, que es un conjunto de alrededor de 21 barrios entre ciudad y campo, y allí en la Farfana se desarrolla la siguiente situación que voy a relatar en hechos temporales.
There, on the outskirts of Maipú is La Farfana sector, a group of 21 neighborhoods between the city and some of the countryside. In La Farfana, there's a situation unfolding, and she will give order to the story and point out 4 events.
El primer hecho ocurre en el año 2001, cuando se comienza la instalación de la planta de tratamientos aguas servidas La Farfana. Esta planta realiza el tratamiento de la mitad de aguas servidas de la región metropolitana, con una población saneada de 3,2 millones de habitantes de un total de 7 millones de habitantes de la región.
The first fact happened in 2001 when La Farfana sewage treatment plant was installed. This plant treats almost half of the wastewater of the metropolitan region, with a remediated population of 3 million people, of a total of 7 million.
Es una de las plantas de tratamiento más grandes de Sudamérica y el mundo, construida en una sola etapa, quedando justamente ubicada al lado de comunidades agrícolas y a menos de 2 kilómetros de un sector densamente poblado de La Farfana.
It's one of the largest treatment plants in Latin America and the world, built in a single stage, and it's rightly located next to agricultural communities and less than 2 kilometers from the densely populated sectors of La Farfana.
Importante señalar que cuenta con alta tecnología de tratamiento de aguas, manejo a través de sistemas bacterianos, manejo de gases odorantes y altas cantidades de residuos en espacios pequeños.
This plant has high treatment technology, has a management of bacterial systems, management of odorant gases, and high amounts of waste in small spaces.
2 años más tarde se da el segundo hecho, en el 2003, cuando ya está instalada la planta y durante su ejecución el territorio se ve impactado fuertemente por olores emanados de la planta, lo que alertó a la población, generando reclamos. Por parte de la empresa, solo se señaló que fue una falla de biodigestores o de los sistemas bacterianos que descontaminan los lodos.
Mm-hmm. 2 years later, the second event happened in 2003 when the plant was installed, and during the execution, the territory has impacted by strong odors emanating from the plant, which alerted the population, generating complaints from the inhabitants due to the bad odor emanating, a situation for which there's no much information or research. And the company pointed out a failure in the biodigesters or system of bacteria that contaminate the sludge.
El tercer hecho se da en el año 2020, cuando se da a conocer la instalación de un megaproyecto habitacional en La Farfana, con una superficie de 70 hectáreas, la cual será para alrededor de 9.800 personas. Este hecho provocó grandes controversias, ya que este proyecto sería emplazado en suelo agrícola, lo que obligaría a la población rural a desplazarse.
The third fact happened in the year 2020 when the installation of a housing mega project was announced, and it covered an area of more than 70 hectares, which will be more than 9,800 people with around 2,800 homes. And this fact caused some controversy since the mega project would be located on an agricultural land and will force the displacement of a part of the population that lives there.
Este megaproyecto habitacional trae consigo una nueva licitación, pues la empresa que actualmente realiza el tratamiento de las aguas servidas del territorio y de la mitad de la región metropolitana no pidió la concesión para ofrecer este servicio al megaproyecto habitacional. Entonces, no pidió este servicio para lo que, ubicando a este nuevo proyecto a kilómetros de las instalaciones antiguas.
So this mega project brings with it a new tender, since the company that currently treats wastewater in the territory and half of the region's population did not request a concession to offer this service to the housing mega project, which will be located exactly next to their facilities.
Es por esta razón que llegamos al último hecho, cuando el año pasado, el 2021, un nuevo grupo de empresas busca instalar una nueva planta de tratamiento en el territorio junto a una de las plantas de tratamiento más grandes de Latinoamérica.
It's for this reason that we come to the last event, the fourth one, when a new group of companies seeks to install a new treatment plant in the territory together with one of the largest treatment plants in Latin America.
Es por esta razón entonces que se ha solicitado al servicio regulador la instalación de una planta de tratamiento de aguas llamada Santa María, la cual se va a encargar de tratar el agua del proyecto inmobiliario para alrededor de 16.000 habitantes.
So, requesting 2021 to the Environmental Assessment Service the installation of the Santa Maria water treatment plant, which will be in charge of treating the waters of the real estate mega project for around 16,000 inhabitants.
El Servicio Nacional encargado de regular esto solicitó a estas empresas una declaración de impacto ambiental por sobre una evaluación de impacto ambiental. La gran diferencia de esto es que en la declaración de impacto ambiental no se solicita participación ciudadana obligada, mientras que en una evaluación de impacto ambiental sí se solicita participación ciudadana. En este caso no era obligatoria.
The Environmental Assessment Service, in charge of regulating again, requested the company an environmental impact statement rather than environmental impact assessment. Let's remember that the big difference is that the requested statement does not oblige the company to carry out citizen participation.
Es por esta razón que la comunidad, a través de 119 firmas de personas naturales y 7 firmas de agrupaciones con personalidad jurídica, solicitaron al ente regulador una participación ambiental ciudadana, de la cual surgieron más de 1.400 observaciones al proyecto. Actualmente la empresa se encuentra dando respuesta a estas 1.400 observaciones.
It's for this reason that the community had to request a citizen environmental participation through 119 signatures of natural persons and 7 groups with legal personality, from which more than 1,400 observations of the project arise. Currently, the company is responding to the observations of objections that arose from the territory.
Sumado a lo anterior, en el sector de la Farfana corre un viento de más de 30 kilómetros por hora y recién en el 2022, este año, se aprobó una normativa para olores en el sector porcino.
In La Farfana sector, there is a wind of more than 30 kilometers per hour. There is no law of odor that allows or obliges to carry out studies of the quality of the air, the density of the gaseous load present in the atmosphere.
Los desechos son licuados a un cauce natural de agua que dota al territorio de este elemento y que se ha visto disminuido, llegando con dificultad a sectores aledaños y de agricultores.
So waste is liquefied to the Zanjón de la Guada, a natural cause of water that provides the territory with these elements and that has been diminished, reaching the surrounding sectors with difficulty.
La zona también fue declarada como inundable según el Plan Regulador Regional.
It is also declared as floodable according to the current Metropolitan Regulatory Plan, and the sector has agricultural plantations.
También permanecen en el sector gran diversidad de aves y aves acuáticas que crecen o se desplazan naturalmente en la cuenca de la región metropolitana. De allí que diversas organizaciones busquen declarar al pueblito de la Farfana como patrimonio natural.
Great diversity of birds and waterfowl that grow or move naturally in the basin of the metropolitan region also remain the sector, which is why various organizations seek to declare the Pueblito de la Farfana as a natural heritage site.
Y finalmente, y muy importante, la comuna cuenta con gran cantidad de napas subterráneas que dotan de agua a 3 comunas de la región. Junto al margen, la región también se encuentra con una de las peores sequías registradas.
Yeah, finally, and very important, the community has a large number of underground layers that provide water to 3 communities in the region. And point aside, the region is one of the is in one of the worst drafts on record.
Es por todo lo antes mencionado que la comunidad se ha organizado por la defensa del territorio y el cuidado de la vida a través de la Coordinadora La Farfana, organización de base que surge desde vecinas y vecinos para defender y cuidar el territorio y todos sus componentes.
So the community organized itself for the defense of the territory of La Farfana through the La Farfana Coordinator, a grassroots organization that arises from the neighbors to defend and care for the territory and all its components and life.
Muchas gracias, ese fue mi relato como habitante y ahora quisiera brevemente en mi rol de facilitadora de espacios de participación presentarles mi análisis de los hechos y desde el aprendizaje por qué este conflicto se puede dar en otros lugares.
Well, She has been telling the story first as an inhabitant, and now she is putting the hat of a facilitator to analyze the conflict from a more professional perspective as a facilitator of participatory processes.
Este conflicto se puede dar en otros lugares cuando se realizan proyectos sin la participación de la comunidad habitante. Como vimos en la escala, es importante propiciar participación involucrada, colaborativa o empoderada, dado que es la comunidad habitante quien mejor conoce las condiciones y características del territorio.
So projects are carried out without the participation of the inhabiting community on an involved, collaborative, or empowered scale. It's the inhabiting community who best know the conditions and characteristics of the territory. So it's key to involve the community from the beginning of an initiative or project to give relevance and meaning to its objective.
Cuando no se informa de manera anticipada y con plazos extendidos que permitan a la comunidad conversar y analizar el proyecto.
When it's not reported in advance and with extended deadlines that allow it to be discussed by the community.
Cuando se aprueban proyectos de manera aislada, no evaluando el daño conjunto y sistémico que puede generar un conjunto de instalaciones en un territorio.
When projects are approved in an isolated manner, not evaluating the joint systemic damage that a set of facilities can generate in a place, in a territory.
Cuando se instala una alta carga de proyectos con impacto ambiental en un territorio reducido con peculiaridades y características propias.
When a high load of projects with an environmental impact is installed in a small territory with its own peculiarities and characteristics.
Cuando no se realizan evaluaciones ambientales periódicas y sistémicas al conjunto de instalaciones.
When periodic and systemic environmental assessments are not carried out on all the facilities.
Cuando no se visualizan otras realidades y características territoriales como oportunidades agrícolas, reservas de agua subterránea, sobrecarga y uso de suelo.
When other realities and territorial characteristics are not visualized, such as agricultural opportunities and the groundwater reserves, overload, and land use.
Y finalmente, cuando no hay diálogo o colaboración entre sectores empresariales que permitan el cuidado de la vida por sobre las ganancias o el ahorro financiero.
And finally, when there is no dialogue or collaboration between business sectors that allow the care of life over profits or financial savings.
Muchas gracias, Pablo, y a todas las personas presentes.
Thank you very much for all those who have been listening, and thank you very much, Diana, for sharing all your story, your personal testimonial. I think it has been very, very clear for us. So now we still have 6 minutes until 1:30, so until 30 minutes past your time. So we can have questions, opinions. We sent you, Paula sent you a link through the chat where you can answer the question: which solutions would you propose to the local people that are facing that conflict? And I see that you are entering the Jamboard. Great, thank you. If you see the left bar, and I will share the the link. Okay, you already have the link. I will share you if you are not used to this platform. It's quite easy. Here, I will share you as an example. If you want to write some proposal for this case or your opinions, you can use the left bar and you select with your mouse the sticky note. So a pop-up will open and you say here, for example, dialogue, and push the blue button, save, so it will be saved. And then you can move your sticky notes. So considering this conflict of others with a community, when two projects are that were not coordinated, two different companies are arriving to the same place, and then the community is being affected by the synergistic effect of two projects of two plants that could affect them directly. So the negative environmental consequences of a conflict between two companies is affected to the third community, and the role of the state is absent. No? There's no urban planning, or there's no plan for them to solve a conflict. So which solutions would you propose to the local people, uh, considering this case? If you were part of the local government, or what should be done between the two companies, or between the company and the community? Feel free if you want to open your microphone. I see some people are writing in the chat, and I see. So feel free. You can use both the Jamboard or the chat if it's easier for you. So I see that Gabriela is writing that many times the problem is not the treatment plant that is well operated and generate odors and visual problems and health problems, but when the plant operates well, in the population does not know that there is an installation of a facility of that kind of type, and it's helping and safeguarding the integrity of the receptive bodies. Thank you, Gabriela, for sharing your opinion. Well, I will see. I see there's another post-it now. I see the local people can write petitions and lobby their ministerial and governmental representatives, stating the issues that they have cited with the proposal. These ideas should also be shared with the companies. Thank you for all those who proposed some ideas, such as getting involved, the local people in the solution, calling for dialogue, and using a consultative approach. Well, we are almost on time, so I would like to say thank you for all your attention. Thank you for answering the questionnaire. Thank you for bringing your collective intelligence to this case. Thank you, Diana, also for sharing your experience and your personal stories. And I will give the word back to Maria Paula so she can introduce Mario in order to dive into the world of fundraising for this kind of projects. So please, Maria Paula, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pablo, for your valuable presentation, and thank you also to Diana. In today's session, we have a specialist invited uh, by his, who is going to talk about the problem of financing in sanitation. The specialist with us today is Mario Suarti. He's a civil engineer, specialized in hydraulics. Currently, he's an international consultant on water and sanitation utilities operation and financing. In over 30 years of professional career, he worked as a strategic planning director in utilities in Ecuador and Argentina, as chief financial officer in Argentina, as a capital works director in for Manila Water Company in the Philippines. Also, he has worked as a staff member of the World Bank. He developed and implement financial operation for projects and utilities in 15 countries. I will give the floor now to Mr. Suardi to begin the presentation.
Thank you very much, Maria Paula, and thank you for the previous presenters, because they gave me an idea that actually made my presentation be built in real time as they were presenting. An idea came to my mind. I added one slide. I stole one slide from Pablo, and pour in some ideas from Diana as well. But let me share my screen now. And let me see, can you see that?
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Okay, let me, where is the button to make it big? Okay, here, sorry. Okay, good. So, today, we heard a lot about multi-stakeholder dialogue to improve or to reduce the risk of projects, and that helps getting financing. But also, there is a big challenge in financing wastewater. Let me try to go through a first part of the presentation explaining the issue at hand. Many of the participants already know about this, but I want to do some recapitulation of several issues that make it really difficult, the financing of the wastewater services, and particularly treatment. And then we will also go through some financing options, and some of the participants here are from countries that are already trying some of these innovative solutions. So they will also know what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's see what happens with sanitation, particularly wastewater treatment. First of all, investment cost relative to other services is huge. We will see that, but just the massive investment for wastewater treatment and the networks to collect all the sewage is really, really impressive compared to, let's say, mobile phones, networks, etc. And we will see, as in the third point, tariffs are nowhere near what people pay for mobile telephony. So, and worst of all, they are not related in many cases to the operational maintenance and investment costs. Yes.
Sorry for interrupting you. I think we are not seeing the presentation right. In my screen, there is no, I'm not seeing the full presentation.
Okay. Let me.
If you can share it again.
Okay. Let's stop sharing and start sharing again. So, is it better now?
I don't know if it's just me, but I am not seeing it like in full screen.
Mario, one tip. The trick is to start sharing, to put it in a presentation mode before to start sharing. So when you start sharing, you select the screen of the presentation mode.
Perfect. Okay. Let me just do that.
It's a little trick. so you can share the full screen presentation mode.
Is that working now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so what I was mentioning is that the investment costs are really huge, and the tariffs usually are not as close to the operating and maintenance cost, not to mention the investment cost or the financing cost of these investments. So it is extremely difficult to face these investments. To make things worse, there is a big gap between the water service coverage and wastewater service coverage, particularly in rural areas or semi-rural areas. So the investments that we need to do in order to catch up with the water service is even making things worse. There's also low willingness to connect to sewage networks because people already have some alternative solutions, and they really don't see, or usually they don't see a benefit in doing that justifies their own investment, because there is a high cost to connect. Usually the septic tanks, etc., are on the backyard of the properties, and to connect to the sewage network, they have to revert the full connection, so, or the facilities, the piping. So that makes it even more complex, disturbing, and people don't want to go through all that trouble just for a minimum benefit as they see it. And they also have low perception of their own responsibility in terms of health of the environment. Okay, many people like to talk about how important is environment, etc., but when it comes up to them investing to change their piping from going to the septic tank that most of the time percolates some pollution to underground aquifers, and connect to the sewage network, which will bring the sewage to a treatment plant, and then the environment will be better, then they look elsewhere and are not so willing to defend the environment. So all of the above ends up in very low political priority, because no politician would like to insist that people has to go through all this trouble, and also to spend so much money in a service that very few people actually really value. So it's a real conundrum. Okay, there are exceptions, and people is gaining more consciousness on this, but it's still a long way to go. Just one snapshot in Peru, but more or less it's the same thing in other countries. You can see that for drinking water, we have lower costs than for sanitation. See, rural is really bad. Electricity is less than half of rural sanitation and a little bit more than half of urban sanitation. Telecommunications is comparable to urban sanitation, but on rural, it's always at a disadvantage, sanitation. And healthcare, okay, this is not per person, it's per bed, because you cannot do exact calculation, but really, if you invest more in sanitation, you will spend less in healthcare. So we need to inform also politicians, and this is part of the multi-stakeholder dialogue, of the cross-link between investing in one thing or the other. Okay. Now, let's talk about trends and the gap. Okay. There's a recent study that covers up to 2017 and compares the trend of increasing water service connections in different countries. And we can see that more or less in all countries, the situation is improving, more rapidly or more slowly, but improving. as a percentage coverage, whilst in wastewater or sewerage connections, not only that the level is lower, but actually the slopes are also lower, and in some cases, as in Costa Rica and Dominican Republic, the trend was to the worse. It's true, it's 2017, the end point, and situations have reverted. Also, I mentioned here Belize, but Belize has reverted that trend, and they're actually improving now the coverage at Belmopan and other areas. Particularly one project has already received funding from an innovative financing mechanism, and that is working very, very well. They received 3 loans, they have repaid them. So things can be changed, actually. But no matter what, the challenge is really, really bad. So let's ask ourselves some questions, okay? First, as I was mentioning before, what is the tariff level, okay? And this is a comparison among many, many countries, and you can see that one city in Germany charges 143% of the water tariff, okay? So this is not on a whim, okay? That counts because they calculated their operating and investment cost, and they are charging that, okay? It's not like in Argentina or in Uruguay, where there's only a simple calculation. We charge the same amount as we charge for water, and that's it. I'm sure there's no calculation there, but at least they recognize that sewerage services are also expensive. So at a minimum, they want to charge as much as for water. That's not the case in many other countries or cities throughout Latin America. And here there's a catch-22 problem. You know, nobody wants to charge more if they provide bad service, because they know that population is going to complain. But with low tariffs, they cannot improve the service. So that's a negative spiral that usually ends up in very, very badly. So the next question is, what is the cost? And then compare the two and try to go up the ladder towards covering the whole operation and investment cost. Now, if the investment in infrastructure has already been done, people can connect voluntarily, or is it mandated? Okay, in some countries, there is compulsory. They are being charged even if they don't connect. But in other countries, people can continue to pollute and to use their septic tanks undisturbed. So there's no obligation to connect. So this makes things worse, because the amortization of the investment on the networks and the treatment plants has to be shared among a fewer number of people. Not to mention that a wastewater treatment plant that doesn't receive the flow, the design flow, then it will work very poorly. The performance will be bad. So another question: does it make sense to invest in wastewater treatment if we cannot secure the funds to a proper operation? So we need to be pragmatic, and let me bring up the case of Nicaragua, where being very sensible, although there's not a huge commitment with private sector participation in the sector, the government was about to receive a donation, a grant from KfW, and KfW, the only thing they requested was that they didn't want to come back in 5 years to see that the wastewater treatment plant was dilapidated because of poor operation. So in the end, the government of Nicaragua hired Bywater, a British company that is operating already in the Central America, and not only they finished 5 years of successful operation of this BOT, but the contract was renewed and it's working perfectly fine, to the point that they also gained another contract to operate another treatment plant in Granada. And both of them are on the Xotoclan. Apologize if I pronounce it badly and wrong, but the case is that these two wastewater treatment plants have reverted the pollution in the lake. So being pragmatic is another key element of solving the sewerage and wastewater treatment issue. Okay. So let's talk about what needs funding and where can we get money from to fund those elements, okay? Let's talk about operation and maintenance. I mentioned that the tariffs should cover at least operation and maintenance, okay? And that is something that every government, every operator should aim for, okay? Because it's justified. You have to maintain and to be able to run the service with the funds that the same system generates. It would be ideal if the tariff can also cover capital investments. It's an effort that the users have to do, but definitely they are enjoying the benefit of the investments that were made, so they have a moral right to cover that cost as well, because some other people are not enjoying those benefits, but that other people usually pay tax, maybe not income tax, but they pay tax when they buy cigarettes or when they buy other goods, because there are some sales tax or value-added tax, so they contribute to the tax collections and they don't enjoy the benefits. So it's okay to use tax to fund capital investments, but we have to remember that those capital investments that everybody contributes to through the tax, it's only enjoyed by the people targeted by those investments. So that's why I put it yellow here, because it's okay, but we need to make sure that we have some justice in the mix, okay? Now, we have philanthropists, and we talked about KfW and GAZ and JICA and IDA, and there are many well-organized or multilateral and bilateral philanthropic funds, but also the case of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So there are many philanthropists that are contributing to the development of the sector, but let's remember that those funds are not there forever. They tend to come and go to other places because the need is everywhere. And they usually, not usually, almost all the time will say no to finance operation and maintenance. So they can contribute to capital investments, to expand the service, to reach the poor. And in some cases, I had the chance to work with the Global Partnership on Output-Based Aid, which aims to bridge the access gap. This means that when there is a cost to access the service, like a connection charge or this expenditure to revert the piping in a house, these philanthropists come forward and help people cover that cost. So this is mostly the role of the philanthropic funds, but this is the core, and we have to do it as equitable as possible. So let's talk about some options for funding, okay, and the commitments that everybody should take or make. In the United States, in the 90s with Bill Clinton, they passed the Clean Water Act and the Drinking Water Act, and they built what it's called revolving funds. These revolving funds are targeting projects that can improve the environment. And most of the wastewater treatment plants in the US since then are benefiting from these funds. The way they work is not that complicated, but basically there is the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, that is the agent that channels funding from the federal government to one state revolving fund in each state, and the state government matches that contribution up to 25%. So there is a constant flow or inflow of funds from these two branches of government to the state revolving fund, and that makes the financial position or situation of the fund very, very strong. So what they can do is to leverage that equity, and they issue bonds that bondholders buy or are sold in the market. And these proceeds are the ones that are being dispersed in the form of loans to whoever requests that and pass a screening process. So they pay the contractors, and then they charge the tariffs, and they can repay the loans. This loans repayment also go to pay back the bondholders. So this is a mechanism that requires a strong commitment by the federal government. It's not a one-off thing that a government can say, okay, put 10 million here, and you go and do the things. Because initially, this flow is very slow, and you will start giving some loans, and suddenly the equity will not be there if there is only, it will be exhausted. And if there is no guaranteed inflow of funds from the government, then the perceived risk of the bonds is going to be much higher. So the opportunity to leverage the equity is also going to be reduced. But as I said, in Belize, they are already trying this mechanism, and it worked very well. It has some lessons that needs or some elements that need to be improved, but actually the fund worked with the equity model. Okay, the equity model is that there is no leverage so far. The contribution was 5 million from CReW and 5 million from IDB as a loan, not part of the Belize Wastewater Revolving Fund. And the borrower was actually Belize Water Services Limited. So the idea is that there will be more borrowers, but at this point in time, as a starting point, Belize Water Services Limited was already with a shovel-ready project, and they started with it, not without some roadblocks, but they pushed through, and they were able to repay the loans. So it can be considered a success story that is ongoing, and hopefully it will grow and continue to make loans to other borrowers. The key point here is that when you start this, you have to avoid the project financing approach. You're not financing a project, you are creating a financing mechanism, okay? So it has to have an independent governance structure, prevent conflict of interest, no participation of borrowers in the board of trustees or the board of directors. Then there should be regular contributions. Hopefully that will happen in Belize as in other areas that are trying also this mechanism, other countries, sorry. Now, people need incentives to apply, okay? There are industries that are polluting or discharging effluents that are not complying to the norms, and they need to comply, but there's no incentive because there's no punishment, there's no enforcing of regulation. So this needs to be improved, but also not with the idea of punishing people. Actually, the enforcement could be to work with these industrial or polluters and point them to technical assistance and funding that they could get from the revolving fund administrator. So this is a process and will need to be revised once and again until it will work okay, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. So we need to adapt to the particularities of each country. In Honduras, they use a trust fund to convey funds, to give assurance to contractors and beneficiaries that the projects are going to happen. Okay, so the principal, in this case, the municipality of Tegucigalpa, would commit a contribution to a trust fund of X% of their tax collection, and the trustee will have the function of managing, protecting, and increasing these funds through some very risk-averse management. But actually, they can gain some interest on those funds when they are not used. But mostly then the municipality will contract out works, and the trust fund will have the direction to pay for the works that are being done. In Jamaica, they also through GEF CReW, a different mechanism was implemented. The GEF contributed equity to a guarantee fund, and I'm jumping a little bit, but there are no investors. This investor is a bank that provided a loan that was 4 times the equity contributed by CReW. But this equity contributed by CReW was the first. Let me explain it here, because it's easier to explain it directly with the example. So CReW provided the equity that was put in a reserve account. Okay, this reserve account was a first loss account, or a loss guarantee, or you could understand it like this: when there is no repayment of a loan, the bank will tap here, the National Commercial Bank. I'm not sure whether they already changed the bank, but after the completion of the scheme, they were looking for another bank to manage. They may have renewed. I lost contact, and the customers, through their bills, they pay what is called a key factor. They also pay the service revenue, but that goes for the operations of the National Water Commission. But the regulator, that works very well, introduced a key factor to fund wastewater works. And what they do is, this key factor guarantees the repayment of the loans per se, and the reserve account is being kept just as a guarantee. So the National Commercial Bank provides a loan to the National Water Commission, and they use the loan to build wastewater infrastructure. Through the collections of the key factor, they repay the loan, and in case there is a shortcoming, a shortfall here, they can tap the reserve account. That didn't happen as far as I know. But you can see that this is a different scheme where there is a leverage, but instead of the bondholders that we were talking about in the revolving fund, in this case, that role is being played by the National Commercial Bank, that keeps these as security or guarantee, and provides the loan as if they were the only underwriters of the bonds that were issued. So the scheme is more or less it can be comparable, the functions are there, but it takes a different form because the existence of the regulator was enough to give confidence to the National Commercial Bank that there was a strong flow of funds that could guarantee the direct repayment of the loan, and the additional guarantee was there, so they were able to charge low interest rate as well. Finally, blended finance, and let me see how much time. Oh, we're already there. Okay. Blended finance is only having development capital from private funding institutions, public funding institutions, convince private capital that the risks are low, or to invite them to provide blended finance. They will charge a market rate, but the concessional rate charged by the development capital will make these blended finance structures more attractive to the borrowers. Okay. So as a conclusion, and I will go to the final slide, it's the challenge is huge. We need flexibility, innovative approaches, and courageous proposal and inspiring leadership to tackle this problem. Okay, let me very, very quickly to explain. This is the slide I robbed from Pablo's presentation, but because it talks about transparency, access to information, inclusion, flexibility, stakeholder engagement, and informed incidents. So I am talking about wastewater treatment plants in Manila. Okay, I work there as a capital works manager or director, and we had a huge problem. We had a loan from the World Bank to build wastewater treatment plants, but the World Bank wanted us to build centralized wastewater treatment plants. And I don't know if you have been to Manila, but the traffic in Manila is absolutely crazy. You can spend the whole morning trying to make a few kilometers. And they wanted us to actually suspend the flow, the traffic on huge roads. I mean, huge roads, not so huge, three lanes probably, that were already almost all day overcrowded, to build main sewers that would lead the sewage to the wastewater treatment plants. And we knew that that was not possible. So we needed to convince them that we needed decentralized wastewater treatment plants, packaged treatment plants that could work. But also we needed to find a suitable place for these small wastewater treatment plants. And Manila is also packed not only with cars, but with people. So it's very difficult to find a free lot to do that. And the people most in need of this sewerage were low-income communities. So this is where the multi-stakeholder dialogue came into being. We needed to convince the World Bank on one side to accept a change in the approach. They were talking about economies of scale. And we needed to convince the population that it was good to have a wastewater treatment plant in their backyard. Okay, to cut a long story short, the discussion with the community was very, very upfront. I don't know if you know, but in the Philippines, the population, the general height of the population is not very, very much, but they love basketball. So in every one of these low-income communities, there was a basketball court. We talked to them, we explained what we needed to do, and through the dialogue, we came up with a solution that was to take over the basketball court, excavate it, build a wastewater treatment plant underneath the basketball court, and then build a new basketball court with grades and other facilities that would suit them. They loved the idea. I mean, it was, we built it together. And then with that solution in place, we went to the World Bank. The first question we asked is, how long did you take to come from the airport to the hotel? And they say, oh, well, it was like an hour and a half. So, okay, so imagine if we start building these big sewers. And we told them what we did with the communities. We explained to them what approach we had. And then we visited the communities with them. We explained that we were tackling the odor with special technologies that was going to be part of the terms of reference or the bidding documents. And we were able to build many decentralized wastewater treatment plants with odor control and Japanese technology. Everybody loved them. And this multi-stakeholder data really worked. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking a few minutes longer.
No, don't worry. We have a question in the chat. I'm gonna read it to you. What does the financing arrangement for Belize revolving funds looks like in terms of maturity period and interest rates?
Okay, I don't have those data with me. I can tell you the maturity period, I think it was 5 years, but I'm not sure. Interest rate, I don't really know. Well, I could dig in my files and check that. Maybe somebody in the audience can also answer. There were a few participants from Belize, but I apologize, I can dig it up.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. How easy is it to maintain these plans?
Okay, let me say, it's not that easy. They're of good technology. This happened 20 years ago. It was Japanese technology, and they were packaged treatment plants with some activated carbon filters for the odor to fight the odor. And it requires an experienced operator. Okay, in Manila, we were a consortium of private companies. Among them were two operators from the UK. I was part of one of them, and also we had Mitsubishi from Japan involved. They were not the contractor because that was forbidden. I think it was Kawasaki, but definitely they transferred technology, and the staff learned quite well. After a few years, they left and they continued to be operated. So it's not that difficult, but it requires training.
We don't have any other question, I think. Okay, we have another question. Okay, who is controlling the operation and maintenance of the Manila's wastewater treatment plant?
Okay, first of all, it's an obligation. It's private sector operation there. Okay, so it's a concession. There are two concessions in Metro Manila, one for the east side, one for the west side. The assets belong to an asset holding company called Manila Water Services, Manila Water and Sanitation Services, or Metro Manila. Yeah, and there is also a regulator. It's an economic regulator, but also takes care of the technical side of it. So there is external control, and it's public sector control.
Okay, thank you. We have other questions. Are they already in operation?
Yes, as I said, this was built some 20 years ago. I was there 2003 and 4, and we were starting building them. I saw one working before I left, and I know that they built quite a few more. So yes, they are in operation.
Thank you, Mario. We don't have any other questions. So I'm gonna...
Sorry, I noticed that Rensford Joseph was the one asking for the arrangement of release. Okay, Rensford, I'm going to send you. I will dig it up and send it to you directly, but I can share with everyone, of course.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Thank you very much, Mario and Pablo. Also, Diana, for your presentations. We have reached the end of the synchronous session of Module 5. We remind you to review the virtual campus where you will find evaluative activities, today presentations, as well as the recording of the session and bibliographic materials to deepen it in the subject. Also, your opinion is very important to us, so we thank you for sharing your feedback on this module through a survey whose link will be sent at the end of the week. The information collected in the survey will allow us to develop a continuous improvement of the modules. It has been an honor for us to facilitate this space, and I would like to thank you on behalf of the German Agency for International Cooperation and ICAP for your valuable participation. Thank you all. You can disconnect now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a nice week.